In today's video, I'm going to be sharing my endgame rogue build, and to be perfectly honest, I think it's going to get nerfed. One of the major mechanics of this build is something that I know not very many people are talking about, and it just hasn't been exposed, and for that reason, I feel like it hasn't been nerfed already. Of course, we don't have access to the full game, and there is a certain level of theory crafting going on with this, but I feel pretty confident with this one, and I think you're going to like it. If you have any questions that I can't get to in the comment section below, be sure to come hang out with me on Twitch. Would love to get to know you personally there. I am giving away free copies of Diablo 4 throughout the early launch week, so definitely come find me on that platform. Otherwise, coming out with us on Discord, we've got a great community over there, and let's begin the video. I want to start this video out by giving you a quick summary of the build and how it works. The build you're about to see is a Twisting Blades Poison Shadow Clone Lucky Hit build. For Rogue, Twisting Blades stole the show with its insane amount of single target damage, absolutely melting bosses like Ashava you see here. What separates my build from the others though is the emphasis on lucky hit. Most people don't realize the insane amount of lucky hits you'll get with Twisting Blades, opening the door for a lot more options for both damage and survivability. In a nutshell, you'll be spamming Twisting Blades for massive damage with practically unlimited energy, which will not only lower your cooldowns, but will also heal you. You'll have an insane amount of lucky hits, proccing effects like potions dropping from the sky and poison pools giving you unlimited uptime on your imbuements. On top of all this, you'll have clones not only copying your attacks, but also powered by imbuements as well. Insane single target, insane AoE, insane leeching. I'm expecting this to get a lot of attention after launch once people start leveling up, and a lot of builds to follow suit. The following is going to be a full detailed breakdown of the build. If you're just looking for the build itself, I've linked it in the description below. All my updated builds can be found in the 1HP Discord. Use the timestamp in the video to check your best Paragon board and glyph options, as I've color-coded them in that section. All right, so first we're going to start with the skill tree here. And in the basic skill cluster, we're going to be taking Puncture. The reason why we take this is because it gives us a vulnerable application that's on demand. We can do it at any time, and it's a guaranteed application. It kind of sucks that we have to weave this in when we do need to apply this, but this seems to be the best form of vulnerable application at this moment. In the core skill cluster, obviously we're taking Twisting Blades. This is a Twisting Blades focused build. In my opinion, this is one of the most, if not the most, powerful skill in the game, and we're going to take Advancing Twisting Blades, which gives us the cooldown reduction, and Enhance, which is, extra damage here. Now, the thing about Twisting Blades that a lot of people aren't talking about is the lucky hit. Now, this has a 33%, and I'm pretty sure it goes up to like 35. I'm pretty sure in the first beta test I got it to 35. Can't remember exactly, but let's just call it a 33, which is a 1 in 3 chance. This is insanely high because the legendary aspect that we take, and we're going to go over legendary aspects later in this video, it makes this skill a 5-hit skill. A 5-hit, and every single hit should have a lucky hit rate. In my personal opinion, I think this is what will get nerfed with Twisting Blades with Rogue. So Twisting Blades not only does really good damage, not only does it do extremely good single target DPS, not only does it do extremely good AoE DPS, not only does it reduce your cooldowns, but it also has the best lucky hit rate in the game, or one of. In addition to Twisting Blades, we're going to be picking up Stutter Step for that movement speed. Our critical hits are going to be pretty good in this build, and we're going to also pick up Sturdy as well as Siphoning Strikes. Survivability is a thing with Rogue, and being able to heal for 3% of your maximum HP every time you critically strike, it's really good because Twisting Blades, you're going to be spamming it and you're going to get a lot of hits and you will get a lot of crits. I'm taking Shadow Step. Shadow Step is amazing. There's a legendary aspect that gives you 2 charges on this. Having 2 charges on this on a 9-second cooldown while you're spamming Twisting Blades, which effectively lowers the cooldown on Shadow Step, is extremely good. The other option here is to obviously take Dash, but the issue that I have with Dash is that it doesn't give you Unstoppable. You need CC breaks. It's very big, especially if you're playing hardcore. Next, we're going to go down to this cluster here, the Subterfuge cluster, and we have to take Dark Shroud. 8% damage reduction at a base gives us 40% damage reduction, which is massive. This is a staple. It is a must. I'm not sure what they're going to do with some of these other skills, but because we lack defensives and survivability, Dark Shroud, you just have to take it. Not to mention, if you take it to countering, you get an additional 8% crit, and we know how important crit is based off of what I told you earlier with Twisting Blades and Siphoning Strikes, and you're going to find out why it's even more important later on in this video. Next, we're going to go down here, and we are 100% taking Poison Imbuement. Shadow Imbuement is just good for leveling up. It's just good for clearing packs. This is not very good the tankier the targets get. This is not very good for world bosses, single target bosses. I've tested the damage that procs after the 6 seconds, and it's just not that great. The bigger value with Shadow Imbuement is by taking Consuming Shadows in the early game for energy, but I'm not expecting energy to be an issue, especially using Inner Sight. Now, Poison is the one imbuement out of all of these that's applied to everything, to elites, to bosses, to trash, everything. So it's really, really good. Cold Imbuement doesn't get applied to bosses, and for me, I'm just not a big fan of having things in my build that won't be able to be applied to bosses. Not to mention, there is a lot of really good synergy with Poison Imbuement in the Paragon board, with legendaries, and you'll see why I'm taking this. But Poison, really, really good. Mixed Poison Imbuement here. We're going to take advantage of the lucky hit here. Poison imbued skills have up to a 30% chance to apply double the amount of poisoning damage over time. That's pretty high considering how good our lucky hit rate is going to be with this build. The other option is Blended Poison Imbuement. I was actually really surprised they buffed this. Especially with the buff, this is definitely an option. Fortunately, this skill cluster is relatively late, and this is a secondary passive, allowing us to just easily respec that whenever we want. Pretty good there. The passives here, Deadly Venom, increased poisoning damage, no brainer here. Poison damage deal 15% less damage. Everything's going to be poisoned. World bosses, elites, everything. Well, unless there are some world bosses that can't be poisoned, which could be the case, right? But as of now, everything can be poisoned that we know of, and 15% less damage is just really good because, again, survivability is a thing. Alchemical Advantage is the other passive that we take, and we're going to max this out because this gives us a plus 3% increased attack speed for each enemy you have poisoned up to 15%. 15% is really high. Now, I am considering removing this just because of the fact that single targets, obviously this isn't going to be as good, but at the same time, single target fights, when you have perma uptime on Twisting Blades through your Inner Sight already, I feel like maybe we can sacrifice this, but there is a possibility I swap this out for some of the other passives up here that are pretty good, like Weapon Mastery, as well as Exploit. Malice is also a pretty decent one. The reason why I'm taking this right now is because I really am trying to stack attack speed, and you'll see this in the legendary aspects section of this video. But if we're attacking fast, we're getting a lot of blades out, and it just really starts multiplying that damage. Next, we're going to take Precision Imbuement. This gives us 9% critical hit chance when we have our Poison Imbuement up, and we're going to have our Poison Imbuement up a lot. And again, another thing that you'll see in the legendary aspect section, but this is a no-brainer. As you saw, we're siphoning HP from crits. We're getting a lot of hits. This is pretty important. The last section here, we're going to be going into Shadow Clone. So we are actually dropping one of the mobility skills because the meta build right now is to take Dash and Shadow Step. We're dropping Dash essentially, and we're taking Shadow Clone. There's some pretty nice synergy with your Shadow Clone comboed with your Imbuments, as well as the Paragon board. I really, really like Shadow Clone. We're going to take Prime Shadow Clone, which gives us Unstoppable. So not only is this a big damage increase, but it's also an additional Unstoppable for 5 seconds. Really, really good. I really like that. Your Shadow Clone deals an additional 20% of your damage. More damage, no brainer there. I'm a big fan of Shadow Clone. This cluster right here, we're going to have to kind of get a feel for how good the lucky hits are at the end game with attack speed. But as of now, I've maxed this out. And the reason why I've done this is because we're getting a lot of damage and a lot of survivability from these lucky hits. Innervation gives us a 30% chance to gain 8 energy. This alone could potentially give us perma uptime. Even on non-single target fights, we have to kind of see how this feels. 1 and 3 is really high, especially for our build. Second wind here also going to allow us to proc additional lucky hits a lot during our inner sight stance. This is something I definitely have to test though. I'm pretty sure with the way it's worded is that every single time you spend 100 energy, despite your gauge not going down, so when you're in inner sight, your gauge doesn't go down. Every time you're spending essentially 3 twisting blades, you're going to proc this 15% increased lucky hit chance for your skills. Next, we're taking Alchemist's Fortune. Non-physical damage you deal also gives you 15% lucky hit chance. This is giving us an additional 15% lucky hit chance for a lot of our skills that are imbued in poison. So obviously we're going to have pretty nice uptime on our poison imbues, and those skills are going to be able to take advantage of this passive here. Like I said, this section right here, we have to see end game. I could definitely see myself making adjustments here. Then we go down to Adrenaline Rush and Haste. I picked up Haste primarily for the movement speed, as well as Stutter Step up here. And the reason why I've done that is because I'm not planning on going Momentum out the gate. I'm actually planning on going Victimize. This is something that not many rogues are doing. The meta build is hands down Momentum, and I will explain why. When it comes to Haste and Adrenaline Rush though, Adrenaline Rush, I have no idea how good my energy regen is going to be at endgame. So far with the lucky hit rate here, with Inner Sight and all this other stuff, I feel like it's going to be pretty good, which is why I only put 1 point into it, and I put 2 points into Haste primarily for the extra 10% movement speed. This is definitely a work in progress as well. I can see myself potentially changing this out. When it comes to Victimize here, now Victimize I'm taking for 2 main reasons. Number 1, damage. Number 2, heal and sustain. Well, how does this work? As you can see, it's a lucky hit. So immediately a lot of people are dismissing it. Not only is it a lucky hit, it's a lucky hit to vulnerable targets. And it's only a 30% chance. Well, I shouldn't say only. 30% for a lucky hit is not terrible. So there's a few hurdles here. Now, we have guaranteed vulnerable application through puncture. And we have very, very extremely high lucky hit rates through our twisting blades. So a 30% chance of causing an explosion, in my opinion, as long as we can keep vulnerable up through puncture, which is an on-demand application, I feel like this is going to pop a lot. This not only gives us extra damage to single target, but it also does extra damage to AoE mobs. This essentially kind of works like a shadow imbuement, where you don't have to kill the enemy, but you're literally just getting these pops every time you practice lucky hit rate. This also goes well with the leeching mechanic, which heals you for every time you get this pop. And we're going to go over that again in the legendary aspect section, because that's on our gear. If we look at momentum here, it's at first it looks super juiced, but if you really break this down, is it? I mean, don't get me wrong. It is good. It's very, very good. But at first I thought this was godsend. But the more I looked at it, the more I was kind of thinking, okay, well, damage reduction definitely very useful, especially if we're very squishy end game. That we just have to see. That's why I'm picking up a lot of life leeching. I'm picking up a lot of defensives. I'm trying to get tanky. Believe it or not, rogues do have access to a decent amount of damage reduction. And obviously we've got nice application of unstoppable CC breaks and movement. So if we don't need the damage reduction, then okay, we move on to the energy regen. If I'm getting good energy regen, especially playing an inner sight build, well, then that's pointless. Then the only thing that's left is movement speed. And to be perfectly honest, that isn't the biggest thing for a rogue in general, especially when I'm picking up stutter step and potentially haste. And on top of all of this, momentum requires you to gain stacks via hitting a stun, daze, or frozen enemy, which I have 0 access to in this build. As a Twisting Blades rogue, that's not going cold imbue. You do have access to daze, stun through shadow step, but I'm not picking that up. I think it's kind of a waste. So the only other way you can get applications of momentum is by hitting them from behind, which of course you can move behind them, but it puts a little bit more of a stress on Shadow Step. And having a build that only has one movement skill, I'm not taking dash. Granted, I do have 2 charges of Shadow Step. I don't know how good this is going to feel. And momentum certainly doesn't give you any damage, so it will definitely do less damage than Victimize. So for me, I'm honestly thinking momentum is not the play, and it's Victimize. Not to mention, momentum also has a healing aspect to it, and the healing aspect isn't great. You get X amount of health back for every stack of momentum you have, and I don't think that is going to scale as well as the heal that you get from Victimize. We'll go over all of this in the next section. If we move any points, we're definitely going to be prioritizing Exploit. We're going to be prioritizing Weapon Mastery, and then we're going to be prioritizing Malice. All right, guys, next section, we're going to go over the legendary aspects, starting with the ranged weapon here. This is our two-handed, so this is going to have double the effect, giving us a maximum of 50% attack speed. We're taking accelerating aspect here. The reason why I'm doing this is because attack speed with this build is massive. Twisting Blades will be spammed with Inner Sight. The more Twisting Blades you land, the faster your Inner Sight gauge fills up, allowing you to have more uptime during your Inner Sight stance, which opens the door for a lot of things. The more hits you're getting off, the more crits you're getting off, the more lucky hits you're getting off. Attack speed is really valuable here, and it is our main priority, one of our main priorities within this build. 50% attack speed at max with this is really good. We can pick up an additional 30% or so within the Paragon board, depending on your route, depending on a lot of things, but 50 to 80, maybe even to 90% increased attack speed is really good. Next, we're going to go over the amulet, which is our 50% extra effect here. This, we're going to go with Blade Dancer's aspect. This is what's going to make Twisting Blades completely broken. Next, we're going to go over our last 2 weapon slots. Aspect of Imitated Imbuement. Your shadow clones also mimic the imbuements applied to your skills. Casting an imbuement skill grants your active shadow clone 16% increased damage for 5 seconds. I'm projecting this to be a fantastic legendary aspect that we definitely want to take. Aspect of Bursting Venoms is next. Now, when you first look at this, in the vast majority of the builds, this is going to be pretty shit. It's a lucky hit. It has to crit on the lucky hit, and it also has to be from a poison imbued skill, which means only 2 skills will be able to apply this, because you can only charge up to 2 skills. Twisting Blades, no problem, because, well, Twisting Blades, you're getting 10 hits, assuming that you're able to imbue 2 Twisting Blade procs. You're getting 10 hits. You're lowering the cooldown on your imbuements, allowing you to get your next 2 charges of Poison Imbue even faster, and our critical hit rate is going to be pretty damn good considering how many attacks we're getting off. This is going to deal poisoning damage, but more importantly, this is going to spawn a pool. And when we're in that pool, Poison Imbuement has 0 cooldown and no charge limit. So it's just an insane amount of damage because we have infinite uptime as long as we're sitting on that pool on our Poison Imbuement skill. This is just insanely powerful if you can proc it consistently. And the whole reason why I believe this build works, simply because of the insane amount of uptime I've personally seen from Bursting Venoms procking. Next, we're going to go into the ring slots, Edgemaster's aspect. This is a pretty solid one. 20% increased damage, up to 20% increased damage based on your primary resource, giving you maximum benefit when you have full primary resource. An Inner Sight Rogue is obviously going to be taking full advantage of this because during your Inner Sight stance, you're just going to have full meter. Next, we're going to take Aspect of Corruption here. Your imbuement skills have a 40% increased potency against vulnerable enemies. So this further emphasizes the need of consistently applying the vulnerable, which is why we take Puncture. Next, we're going to be going through our armor pieces, and we're going to start with the helmet here. Gain a free Dark Shroud every 3 seconds when standing still. Each Dark Shroud shadow grants up to 4% increased damage reduction. Having an extra 20% flat damage reduction is really, really nice. And the fact that this synergizes really well with our key defensive, I just really like this. And the fact that you're getting an extra shadow every 3 seconds alleviates a little bit of the micromanaging that you have to do. It's actually pretty nice, but we're mainly picking this up because of the stacking damage reduction. I'm pretty sure the damage reduction stacks. If they remove that and it is not actually stacking damage reduction, we would definitely replace this with another defensive. For the chest piece, we're going to be taking aspect of the siphoned here. This is another nice lucky hit rate one that I am very much looking forward to testing out. Again, we need to have vulnerable applied to our target. Core skills have up to a 20% chance to drop a healing potion. If we're going to be lucky hitting every single time on every single twisting blades, a 20% chance to drop a potion is insanely high. I feel like this is going to give us infinite potions, especially on single target boss fights, world bosses. It's going to be raining potions. Very much looking forward to testing this out. Next, we're going to our glove. Now, I've added this unique just because I want to emphasize this. This is definitely best case scenario. Damaging a vulnerable enemy with a cutthroat skill has up to a 30% chance to summon a shadow clone that mimics your attack, which essentially means that we should have 2 shadow clones now. And if this shadow clone here, which it should, if it also takes advantage of imitated imbuement, this is just going to be absolutely insane. Not to mention it's ranking up our shadow clone damage, our ranks to core skill, our vulnerable damage, and attack speed. This is literally every single thing that we could possibly want from gloves. Now, obviously, we might not be able to get this unique. So in the event that we don't, well, first and foremost, gloves, you can equip an offensive aspect. If there's an offensive aspect that we don't know about right now, that's really, really good. Definitely throw it into this slot here. The other options are unstable imbuements here. Another offensive legendary, that's a decent one. Or you can go into Manglers, which is going to give us our only CC application, which is Daze. So again, another lucky hit one that we need to have vulnerable on. Those 2 things shouldn't be an issue. This will allow us to daze those targets, and a 45% chance for that to happen is pretty high for our build. Next, we're going to be looking at the pants. We're going to take another defensive here, and this is the key passive that I was talking about before. Explosions from victimized key passive heal you for X life for each enemy damaged up to a maximum of X life. The X, I'm pretty sure, means that this will continue to scale up as you get this and discover this aspect on gear in the higher tiered worlds. So this could potentially be really, really good, and it could potentially be pretty shit. I'm not 100% sure, but assuming the life is pretty good, this will be really nice, because not only are we getting heals from siphoning strikes, not only are we getting heals from potions that are raining left and right, but we're also getting heals from this key passive. Like I said, another one that we're gonna have to test and see. Next, we have the Ravagers aspect on our boots. This is a massive one. Shadow Step has an additional charge. This is mainly for that extra charge. This essentially gives us an extra CC break. It gives us an extra skill that will teleport us to the target, giving us extra movement speed. And it also gives us more ability to get behind the target in case you are taking momentum for this build. Specialization here, Inner Sight, that's a no-brainer. I love Inner Sight. It's hands down the best option for twisting blades. All right, next we've got the Paragon board, and we're going to go over the boards first. Now, the way I'm going to do this, guys, I'm just going to give you my recommended boards, because everyone's build is going to be a little bit different. Everyone's order might be a little bit different. And a 6-board build versus an early game 2-board build, 3-board build is just going to be different. When it comes to the boards that we're recommending, we're going to be looking at my notebook guide here, and I've written them out so it's a lot easier for you to see. We have 9 boards, 8 if you exclude the starter board that you're required to take. I've essentially highlighted the top options in purple, so No Witnesses, Exploit, Cunning, and Tricks of the Trade. Those are the top boards that I would recommend prioritizing for this build. And Leyrana's Instinct is one that I would consider, that I would just need more testing for. This has a very interesting legendary node, and it has a very interesting damage modifier with dodge. This could be a complete hit or miss, so this is just something that we're going to have to see. Going over the ones that I would recommend, starting with no witnesses. The offensive rare node on this board is going to give you 10% damage, and the damage clusters, if you haven't seen that video, definitely check it out. I talk about the difference between diversifying your types of damage. All damage seems to be in its own cluster. All of the damage cluster stuff, it is speculated information. It is hypothesized information, so we don't know 100% for sure. We're just making educated guesses at this time. But if it is true, the 10% extra damage is very valuable because it could potentially be in its own cluster. Not to mention the life that you get for the second node within the radius is really good. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. These two nodes are the nodes that are within the glyph radius. Ultimate skills deal 30% increased damage. This is a legendary that I actually really want to pick up, and it would really synergize well with our build. I got to figure out a better way to actually pick this up, because you do need to sacrifice quite a bit to go out and pick it up. I don't know if this is going to be in its own damage cluster. If it is, then this becomes very, very attractive. If it's not, then it could be something that I skip, depending on how many boards, depending on how many skills, depending on how many glyphs. Everything is just really subject to the situation. I like no witnesses. It's pretty solid. Exploit weakness is next, and this is going to give us a 10% damage to vulnerable targets for our offensive rare node option that's within the glyph radius. You're going to need strength in order to unlock this, but damage to vulnerable targets, again, when it comes to the clusters, just seems to be really, really good. Vulnerable being projected or speculated to be within its own cluster. The potion here is kind of smudge. I don't know. This seems to be, on paper though, the worst defensive, but the vulnerable that you get from this seems to be really, really good. And the fact that at a 4 radius glyph, it is our highest int provided board, which means that if we take any glyphs that scale off of the intelligence stat, this is definitely a pretty attractive board for that glyph. Legendary on this board is one that's really up in the air right now. It's being speculated. If the damage that comes from this legendary is with it is classified as its own cluster, damage cluster, or damage bucket, this is going to be very, very good and most likely worth going after. If it's not, then, well, that changes the story. Cunning Stratagem is next. Now, I like Cunning Stratagem because this gives us 14% core damage, meaning most of our damage is being applied from our twisting blades. Sure, we have poison, but our poison, the vast majority of our poison is being applied from our twisting blades. Core skill damage going to be really, really good. Not to mention, outside of damage to CC targets, which we don't take this board, and outside of damage to elites, this is the highest multiplier that we can get. It will require int. The armor that we get from the defensive node is pretty solid too, and we are not going to be even looking at the legendary here because we're obviously an inner sight enjoyer, right? We're not going to take cheap shot or deadly ambush because of the damage traps and damage to CC. We don't really have access to CC. Tricks of the Trade is another really good one. The tankier targets that you need extra damage for typically are elite. Tricks of the Trade is one that I am definitely going to be taking, even in like a smaller 3-board build. When it comes to Leorana's Instinct, like I said in the beginning of this section, the resist is really nice. I really feel like we're going to need to pick up some resist nodes in the Paragon board. But the damage to dodge is just, it's very interesting. I have no idea what cluster it's going to be. I'd imagine it being in this damage cluster, which makes it pretty attractive. And the multiplier is pretty good, but I just don't know what the uptime on this will realistically be. If we're able to pick up this legendary, maybe this is worth going for. But this legendary is just really, really far away. This is the board right here. And as you can see, it is way out here, and the radius is over here. Like, this is just really, really far. Now, the main reason why I'm actually considering this is not so much for the dodge. It's actually for this cluster right here, which gives us 10% attack speed, 20% with the bonus, and an additional 10% attack speed, 15% attack speed, giving us a whopping 35% attack speed. This is what's going to give us up to an 85% attack speed when coupled with our legendary aspect. That's really, really good. So I'm not sure how I'm going to go about trying to pick up this cluster. I really want to, but we're going to have to kind of wait and see. And while I was recording this video, I was wondering why this was actually at 10, because I was like, I'm pretty sure that was at 12.5. I wrote 10 for whatever reason. That's an error. It's 12.5. That's why I made the point that it had a pretty good multiplier, but it was only 10. So I was kind of confused while I was saying it. But yeah, I did just double check. It is a 12.5% damage multiplier. So again, this is just one that we're going to have to see. Next, we got the glyphs here, and this is organized the same way our boards were. Purple equal top options, green equal secondary / subjective options. I have ordered this in alphabetical order, starting with ambush going all the way down. Now keep in mind, I'm giving multiple options here because a lot of this stuff, again, is subject to just so many different variables. Bane is the first one here, and this is going to give you increased poison damage up to 9.6% at max glyph, starting at 2 for every 5 strength that you purchase. And if you max that out on the correct board, you'll be able to multiply that by 10. And the max bonus being 9.6, this will give you a maximum potential of 96% increased damage. The secondary damage for Bane, poisoning damage effects have a 10% chance to deal double the amount of damage over their duration. This is a really nice additional bonus. This is effectively on average an increase of 10% damage. Seems pretty fun considering not all glyphs are going to give you extra damage as the additional bonus. Chip is the next one that's on my list. Now this gives us extra physical damage. The multiplier is actually really high, but the issue with this is that if our lucky hits in our bursting venoms is just really doing exactly what we thought they would be doing, then the vast majority of our attacks will be poisoned. Now this still does have value because remember, at the end of the day, you only get 2 charges of your poison imbue, meaning all the rest of your twisting blade spam will be considered physical. However, if you're standing in your bursting venoms pool, and or if you're just getting really, really good resets from your twisting blades, that is just going to continually raise the uptime on non-physical damage, effectively making this worthless for your imbued poison attacks. So this one I'm not really sure. I have to get a better feel for the end game with our lucky hits, with our bursting venoms, and just see how that feels. This is going to be categorized as a secondary / subjective option for now. Closer is the next one that I would really recommend. Cutthroat skills deal extra damage for every 5 dex that's purchased. It's very nice that this requires dex. It's even nicer that it's considered a cutthroat skill, meaning every single twisting blades is going to be benefiting from this glyph, and the multiplier is nice and high, 144% at max. We have combat, which gives us increased critical strike damage for every 5 intelligence purchase. Clearly this is one of the highest multipliers. I believe it's actually the highest multiplier outside of like the rare node stuff, although it does scale off of the intelligence that we purchase in the range, giving us a maximum of 9, and in certain cases maybe even 8 depending on the board that you're actually taking. The additional bonuses for closer in combat are not offensive. They don't give damage. Closer gives us 10% reduced damage. Again, like I said, you can actually get a decent amount of reduced damage or damage reduction for rogues. This is definitely a good one to have. So I'm definitely not bummed out that this is not an offensive additional bonus. We need survivability. I'm expecting that to be extremely important in the end game. Combat's additional bonus is one that is either really good or really bad. Again, this really depends on the end game, which is why some of the skill points in the skill tree is subject to change. If this performs really well, we can definitely save some additional skill points in the skill tree, effectively raising our DPS as well. Next, we're going to go down, and efficacy is one that I would also recommend. Grants extra percentage bonus to all rare nodes within range. When these types of glyphs start getting juiced out, the effectiveness is really, really nice. Not to mention, this gives us an extra 20% increased potency on our poison. Now, this does require intelligence, but it only requires 25, making it a little bit less strenuous. Exploit is the next one. This is one that requires strength, meaning that we can only maximize this by 10, most likely 9, depending on what board you take. But this is pretty nice because this gives us extra damage to vulnerable targets, and we're expecting vulnerable damage, excuse me, to be very valuable because we're expecting it or projecting it or hypothesizing that it is within its own damage cluster. If that's true, this becomes really good. If that's not true, then, well, this becomes less valuable. For our build specifically, when an enemy is damaged by you, they become vulnerable for 3 seconds. This actually has some pretty good value. Now, this does have a cooldown of 20 seconds per enemy, but this is pretty nice. When it comes to packs, this is going to allow us to apply vulnerable to pretty much everything around the area without having to puncture, meaning we get to a big pack, twisting blades is spinning around us. This is going to instantly put vulnerable on everything rather than us having to apply vulnerable on them by using puncture, which isn't going to really work out very well, right? So this actually has some nice synergy within our build, and anytime that we don't have to apply vulnerable through our puncture, even after the 20 seconds, let's say on a single target boss fight, that's just extra DPS because we're just spamming more twisting blades. Now, the multiplier might be a little bit low, further leading us to believe that vulnerable will be in its own cluster. It's like, why would this multiplier be so low compared to some of these other clusters? Like, for example, Cutthroat, which is a lot more accessible, that being 144%. I just have a feeling that vulnerable is just going to be very valuable at the end game. The next two are going to be green ones. Fluidity being the magic node one. Maybe you want to juice out some magic nodes, especially in the early game. That's not too bad. And agility skill giving us 9% increase energy regen. Not the best. I mean, we do have Shadow Step. That's going to give us some extra energy regen. Could be good, could be completely worthless depending on how good our energy regen is end game. If you want to juice out your nodes, this might be an option for you, but this, you're not, just know that you're not going to get much value out of your additional bonus. Pride is another one that I have selected at green. Now, this one is actually pretty juiced if you're dealing physical damage. So if you're playing Twisting Blades and you're not going for an imbuement build, then this would definitely be an option, one of the top options. However, for us, again, we're dealing a lot of poison. I don't see it synergizing super well with our build, mainly because it is physical damage tracker. This is going to increase our damage to poisoned targets. So if the target's poisoned, this is going to be giving you extra damage. Now, obviously, the percentage here, the modifier isn't amazing. Not to mention, it also requires intelligence. However, again, this is going to be applied to every single thing we do. We do poison damage, we do twisting blades, everything we do, they're going to be taking additional damage, and that's why I really like this. On top of that, the additional bonus also extends our poisoning damage. It makes it last longer, 33.3%. Turf is the final purple top option that I would say. This gives us increased damage to close targets. Turf gives us 9.6% at max, starting at 2% extra damage to close targets. And considering we are a melee focused build, we're going to have very high uptime on this glyph right here. This is a strength based glyph, meaning we can get up to 10. There's only one board that gives us this option, so you're more likely to take this on a board that gives it a max multiplier of like 9, maybe even 8, but it's still, I would say, really, really, really good. Versatility is the last glyph that we're going to go over, and this is a green one for me. This is going to juice out the magic nodes. Again, if you want to juice out the magic nodes and you don't want to take fluidity, then versatility is your other option. This is going to increase your non-basic and non-core skills, essentially being applied to your imbuements and poison damage, which you will have a lot of. So this could definitely be an option as well. The last section of this video is going to be a short summary going over some of the pros and cons. Starting with the pros, we've got extremely good AoE. Not only are we getting AoE from our twisting blades, which in itself, it is very, very good, especially if you can move around pretty well, but victimize is also, I think, going to be pretty decent. I don't know how big the explosions are, but there's some AoE there. And poison also does have a certain amount of AoE to it as well. Extremely good single target. Inner sight is like the king of single target here. With twisting blades especially, single target is just insane. Rogues were widely considered to be the kings of single target during the beta test for the Ashava fight, mainly because of Twisting Blade's inner sight. So obviously a lot of classes are going to catch up in the single target department, but single target is one of the fortes of this build thanks to inner sight. Another thing that I do want to shed some spotlight on is the 2 on-demand damage elements. We have physical damage and poison. We don't need to apply poison damage if we don't want to. All we have to do is not use our imbues. If we don't charge those imbues, we're going to be dealing physical damage. Now, this is important because resists are a thing. I ran into mobs in the beta test that would heal from shadow damage. All my shadow damage was healing that target. That experience made me not want to stack all my damage in a single element. The fact that I can swap from physical and poison on demand, I think that is a massive W without losing any DPS by doing so. The last major pro that I would say is that we have 3 CC breaks, 2 of which are on low cooldown. And those 2 are coming from our Shadow Step, which we have 2 charges of. Twisting Blades in itself will lower the cooldown on that 9-second cooldown from Shadow Step, effectively giving you higher uptime on Unstoppable, but we also get it from our Shadow Clones as well. Having CC immunities are really, really good. One of the main cons that we have with this build is a lack of CC. Now, this is something that I felt like was worth sacrificing because there are a lot of things that you can't CC. Like you can't CC world bosses, certain elites. So not having access to any CC in our build won't be as much of a handicap during those more challenging fights. I'm not sure if we're going to be squishy. I feel like it is absolutely something we need to focus on speccing into. But if we spec into it enough, I have a feeling we're going to be just fine, and it will be enough. If you do ignore those stats and you prioritize damage all the way through, then you're in for a rude awakening because we are very squishy. And the fact that we don't have any defenses out of Dark Shroud in our kit outside of the legendary aspects, it just won't be a very good experience. And that'll pretty much do it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Come hang out with me on Twitch for the launch, and I'll see you in the next video.